I am thankful today to have with me Brother or Dr. Jack Knapp, my brother in the Lord, and my hero in the faith. I have known them since I came to Virginia and watched them in multiple stages of their ministry, he and Judy, and they have been a blessing and a godly example to me. And today, unfortunately, we have the connection of grief with Judy going home to the Lord a little over 2 years ago, and we're going to talk today from his perspective. They were married for 62 years, right?
62 years, 6 months, and 9 days.
Okay, yes, right down to the day.
Right down to the day.
And godly example of what a marriage should be like, and we are privileged to talk to you today.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Sonia. I have many fond memories of you and your relationship with Judy.
Yes.
You had a lot of, probably of people who were not part of our organization. You probably had as much contact with her as any individual did, because you were always involved with the state
Yes.
competition.
Yes.
And if I remember right, you handled all the art.
I did.
And every year, Judy was counting on you to take that burden off her, because she had to prepare all the competition while I was in legislature.
Okay.
So
that was a lot.
I had nothing to do with the preparation of it. I just got all the glory from what was done. And so she was the one. And I remember her shock one year when you came to her and said, Miss Knapp, I'm not going to be able to handle the art this year because I'm going to have a baby.
Took some time off, right?
The timing is not going to work out. And she really had to scramble to find somebody to replace you. I remember that very well.
Well, I do remember so much that I felt so unworthy and untalented in the areas that I was judging, and you all always had the nicest things to say and would encourage me, like, no, you should be doing this, and would just encourage me to be able to do it.
Well, and you were an organized person, and that was of the people who were over the various areas of competition, that was more important than your particular abilities.
Okay.
If you had lots of abilities but could not be organized, the whole thing would fall apart, because the competition was so large. And I think by the time you became the director of the art competition, we had spun off the elementary, so it was only junior, senior high.
Yes.
But it was still a huge competition.
You're right. Thousands of kids on the campus that day, which was wonderful. Well, for the benefit of our listeners who may not have known Judy, tell me some things about her that you'd like to whatever, her personality or how you met her, or just whatever you want to share with us.
Well, I think probably could be helpful for people to understand our backgrounds.
Okay.
Our backgrounds, we were both, her family's from the Midwest, from Chicago. I was from Kalamazoo, which is halfway between Chicago and Detroit. Okay. So we're Midwestern families, but our families were vastly different. My family was a Christian family. My mom and dad, the people I called mom and dad, were born-again Christians and very active in local church. Her family, both her parents were raised in dysfunctional homes today. We would say that. And I think it's really a miracle how much they loved each other and what they knew familial love was. Okay. Because of their backgrounds. From their backgrounds, they shouldn't have known that. Oh. But, this is not to be about them, but they were, Judy, my family, the furthest we ever traveled was all the way to Holland, Michigan, 59 miles. Most of our travel was within 25 miles of where I was born, except for one sojourn in Florida when my father couldn't get work in Michigan. We went to Florida and were there for a few months, which, by the way, I hated. But anyway, I disliked it for two reasons. one, I had to wear shorts, and I didn't like to wear shorts. And number two, there was no snow at Christmas.
Right.
And I'd always had snow at Christmas, and I didn't believe that you could have Christmas without snow. So I never have gotten used to that, over that. But Judy's family moved a lot.
Okay.
Her dad built probably one of the first motorhomes. He took an old truck and built a house on the back of it.
Wow.
To take his family to Arizona. They lived in Chicago. They lived in, her parents lived in Idaho, on the Oregon-Idaho border. They bought 3 farms in Michigan. They lived in California. They lived in Arizona. I mean, Judy described her family as gypsies.
Okay.
Now, when she would say that, people would think of the European gypsies. That's not what she meant. She meant they were restless. They were constantly moving. And the farm that they bought, where I met Judy, was at least the third Michigan farm they had had.
Wow.
And they came from California, Fontana, just outside Los Angeles, moved their whole family back to Michigan, 5 children. The oldest girl was living in Michigan, already married, and bought this farm, a rundown farm, 2.5 miles from a little country church. And I'm in a little country church. Your house is bigger than our church was. And the church was 7 miles from Bangor, Michigan, not Bangor, Maine. People always think Bangor, Maine, Bangor, Michigan. And 7 miles from Lawrence, Michigan. So, I mean, it's way out in the sticks. So far out in the sticks that there was a 1-room schoolhouse that Judy's 3 younger siblings went to, 8 grades in 1 classroom. The name of the school was Hicks School Number 3. And I think it was very appropriate because it was out in the Hicks. I always wondered where number 1, number 2 were. But anyway, when the family moved in, our preacher was a young preacher, went down and invited the kids to come to Vacation Bible School. Judy's younger sister came, the sister 6 years younger, got saved. And so, of course, the pastor followed up. And the whole family came to church. Well, the church was so small, when a new family would come to church with 5 kids, they filled up half the church.
Oh, yes.
You know, I mean, it's filled up, jammed into one pew. I mean, it was the church that small. Well, at that time, I was a senior in high school, and the pastor loved to use teenagers. We had about huge group of teenagers, about 25.
Wow.
Teenagers
For a small church, that's a lot.
It was really something. And the amazing thing is that most of those ended up in the ministry or married to ministers. It was really something, the impact that young pastor had. And so I was leading singing, and Judy and her 4 siblings that were still at home came walking in, and of course filled up half the church. And I looked down and I said, I'd like to meet that girl. And so, to make the long story short, within 2 months, we were, as the term was at that time, going steady.
Okay.
Now, I didn't know it until after Judy went home to heaven, but Judy had kept a calendar of all the contacts that we had.
Oh.
And she had marked on a calendar, and she kept that. And when I got in a treasure chest, we had a chest in our front room, which she put mementos in.
Okay.
When I was going through that and found that, she marked down every time that we were together from May 13th of 1958 until this year was over, because I was in college. And so she had every date marked down.
Oh, that's
that we
special.
were together. Not necessarily dates, but every time we were together. Well, we lived 25 miles from the church.
Oh.
But that was a church we had gone to before we moved to this new house, I say. And so, but we older kids wanted to keep going to that church because it was so familiar. So our parents drove us 25 miles to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Sunday night, every evangelistic meeting. We drove that far. So
what a faithful example.
They were. They really were. Well, Judy's parents got saved, and they settled down. They lived on that farm for 20 years.
Wow.
And retired from that farm back out to Arizona to the desert where they built their retirement home. But so our families were quite different. But I wanted to I wanted my family, Judy and my family, I wanted to travel because she had done all that traveling. So some of our early goals were we wanted to visit all 50 states, which we did.
Oh, that's amazing.
For our 50th anniversary, VAIB, Landmark, and our children gave us a cruise to Alaska. And that was our 50th anniversary. And that was our 50th state.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's amazing.
But Judy was, she was always a thinking person. I think her desire was to be a blessing to others. Her theme song was Channels Only.
Yes.
She wanted to be a blessing to others, and she was. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have talked to me about what she meant to them.
Yes.
You know, and over the years. And her life verse was Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path. I say she was my California wife, because God brought her all the way from California so she could meet me.
Yes.
She was definitely God's special gift to me.
Yes.
In so many ways.
Your story's already amazing of just where all they had been and how she ended up there, and then you're traveling 25 miles or minutes? Miles to church, and then that's where you two met. If that's not God, I don't know what is.
In fact, I after by then I had sold my horse and bought a car. I had paid $75 for the car. It was overpriced, but it was a 50 Chevy convertible.
Oh wow!
And so when I wanted to meet her, and she was very shy, she was very withdrawn. You wouldn't know it as you knew her, but she was very shy, and I wanted to meet her, and so I tried several times, but there was a geek in our church, and he cornered her, and I couldn't get a chance. And I talked to everybody, you know, and I was just so upset that he got to talk to her and I didn't. So I decided I was going to see her. So I drove over to their farm because I knew where their farm was because we had lived in that area for about 10 years before we moved 25 miles away. And so I knew all the farms and everything. So I was driving down to their farm at the dead end road, 2.5 miles from the church, gravel road. And I pulled up the corner, and here her mom and dad and the carload of kids were coming out. I don't know, what am I going to do? So her dad pulls up, and he recognized me because I was a song leader in the church. He knew me. They'd been coming enough that he knew I was. He rolled down the window. I rolled down my window, and he said, what are you doing over here? I said, oh, I just out driving around. Well, you know, he believed that. Like,
right.
You know, so he said, we're going over to Mike West, one of the members of the church. I said, well, I'll follow you over. So I followed him over. And, of course, Judy piled out of the car with her mom and dad, and they all started in the house. And her dad came over to talk to me. Well, I didn't want to talk to him. So finally, after I had said what I had to say to him, I hollered, Judy. And so she came over and stood by the car. I wasn't a very good gentleman. She stood by the car, and I talked to her. And that was our first going out.
Okay.
Was that time. And from then on, it wasn't long until we were going steady. And then we were married 2.5 years later.
Okay.
After I'd finished my second year of college.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, is there anything you want to tell us about, like, her health battles or her passing?
Yes, Judy, you knew her well, and Judy was a bundle of energy, always had been. I'll give you an example. We always had a garden, and every year Judy would grow, pick, and can 100 quarts of green beans.
Wow.
So we had green beans.
Wow.
You ask my son about it today, he will not eat green beans. He said, I picked and snapped all the green beans I ever wanted to see. But anyway, and fruit, of course, we were in Michigan where lots of fruit was available from the farmers, and most of it you could get for a little bit of nothing. And so she maintained the garden, of course, maintained the house, raised the kids. She was a stay-at-home mom, and just a bundle of energy. And when it came to Virginia, she became my secretary. Jack Rubin was in junior high school. Judy Lynn had one more year of high school, then off to college. And so she became my secretary. And from then on, we worked together. But a lot of people didn't know it, but she was really ODAX. She was the one who organized all the competition, everything, and I could not have done it without her. But she was just a bundle of energy. Well, we had not been in Virginia. We'd been in Virginia quite a while. I shouldn't say not long. We had been, because we came here in 80. We came in 78. We came to Landmark in 86.
Okay.
In 86. Yeah, we came to Landmark. And in 94, she was having some difficulty, and we didn't understand what was going on. And so we went to the doctor, and he examined her, and he said, I think it's a gastric, but he said, we want to make sure. And so I want you to go to St. Mary's and have a heart catheterization.
Okay.
So we drove over to St. Mary's. He called, made the appointment. We drove over, and we sat in the parking lot. She said, honey, this is foolish. She said, it's just gastric. That's all it is. And then she remembered her life verse. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. She said, honey, I'm doing it again. I'm leaning to my own understanding. We went in to the hospital, and the doctor performed the heart catheterization, and she had restriction. And so at that time, they were using angioplasty. I'm not sure if they use it now, but they put a balloon in and press the plaque back against the side walls. I think now they do it all with stents. But at that time in 94, they did that. Well, she said she also was someone who did a lot of research, medical things. Okay. In fact, she was so good at medicine that her kids called her Dr. Mom. I mean, if they had a question on anything, they'd call her, and she would look it up, and she would do the research on this before the days of the internet. She had medical books. She had a library of medical books, and she knew what was in them.
Right.
And so she said, well, I've heard about this chelation. So she did that for 13 years.
Okay.
And seemed to correct her issues. Well, of course, by then our doctor had moved. She'd gotten another doctor. And she went to this new doctor, and he said, I don't like what's going on. So he said, I want you to come in and have a nuclear stress test. Okay. So she went in and had a nuclear stress test, but something was wrong with the machinery. And they said, well, go have lunch and come back. We'll have to redo it again. We went back and did it again. And this was across town at Dr. Henrico Doctors.
Yes.
And we're about 35 minutes from there. By the time we got home, the doctor had already been on the phone to our home phone. Even at that time, we didn't have cell phones. It was still landlines. And he said, you need to report in. This was Thursday. You need to come tomorrow for a heart catheterization. Oh. So on Friday, we went for a heart catheterization, and the doctor was upset because he was not our primary doctor. Our primary doctor was out of town, and so he had to do it. He said, where's the doctor that's supposed to be doing this? And I said, I don't know. He said, take this buzzer, go to the cafeteria. He said, it'll either be 15 minutes or it'll be a couple hours, depending on what we have to do. Well, Jack Rubin and Debbie were there, and we sat in the cafeteria. The buzzer went off, and I said, it must be good news or bad news, because it was only 15 minutes. I walked in, as soon as I saw his face, I knew it was not good news. He said, they do not make enough stents to solve your wife's problems.
Wow.
We're scheduling for heart surgery on Monday, because it was Friday. They don't do surgery except emergencies on Saturday and Sunday. And I said, well, can I take her home? He said, absolutely not. He said, she's got to stay here because I'm afraid how serious her situation is. So we went through the weekend and we met with the surgeons and everything, and they said, we're set up to do 3 open heart surgeries each day, 2 minor and 1 major. We have 9 patients for heart surgery on Monday, and we'll determine on Sunday who's number 1, 2, 3, and so on. When they came in on Sunday, said, you're number 1 to Judy.
Oh.
So she went in, and she had 6 bypasses.
I remember that.
I'm sure you do remember that. And when she got through, of course, there was the recovery time, which was very difficult for her because, again, she was so active and so used to being active. And of course, when they cut you open that way and do all of that, it was. She said to me one day as we were driving, because I was still preaching 2 times every Sunday, and she would ride in the car and go with me. She said she couldn't even ride in the little car. We had a little Cougar. She couldn't even ride in that because the suspension was so hard. Mm-hmm. And one day she said to me, honey, I don't think it's going to get any better than this. And she talked about all the pains and things that she was feeling, not from the heart, but from the surgery.
Okay.
And so one day we were coming up from Abingdon on I-81, and she said to me, honey, I feel normal.
Oh, wow.
And so she was really excited. Well, time went by. We retired in 2011, and I did some ministry. I called it Christian Heritage Sunday, and I'll go to churches and preach about the heritage we have in Virginia. And then we were doing a lot of traveling as much as we could, and we were in California, and we were following the 49er Trail, which is the road where the gold is in California. It's named for the gold miners.
Sure.
And there's a little town out there called Volcano, and it is a beautiful cave called the Black Chasm. We'd been in it once before, but we were close to it. She said, let's go again. That's a very unusual cave. It has stalactites in it, and they're like soda straws, and they go all kind of crazy ways.
Oh.
And it's beautiful. Really, this cave has more of those than probably any other cave.
Okay.
Anyway, to get in it, you go in, and then you go down 200 steps. We got down to the bottom of the cave, and she said, honey, I don't feel well. There were just 2 couples and the guide, that's all. And I told the guide, I said, my wife has to come back very slowly. And so the guide just told there was only one way, so they told the other couple, you go on ahead. He stayed with us. We got her up top of the cave. She said, let's go get lunch. Well, Subway was our favorite lunch when we're traveling because you get what you want, and it's a light meal. It works better. We sat in front of Subway at Jackson, California. She said, honey, if I was in Richmond, I'd be in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
I said, honey, there's no hospital here. We're not in Richmond. And I looked up, and there was a 30-bed hospital 2 blocks from where we were.
Okay.
Took her there. They took one look at her. They said, we can't help you, but you've had a heart attack.
Oh.
That time, an ambulance was bringing in a patient. And the head nurse said, will you take this lady to Sacramento? They took her to Sacramento, and she had a heart attack, and they put in a stent. Well, we had flown to California. My wife said, well, we need to fly home. He said, no. He said, we fixed you. Stay. So we finished out our vacation, came home. That was in 2018. And then in 2021, she was having some difficulty and went in and found out she had another heart attack, and they put in 7 stents and found out that the bypasses were failing.
Okay.
Well, we knew from the original doctor, the surgeon, that they last from 15 to 25 years. Hers barely made it 15 years because her body, for some reason, generated all this plaque. Well, I always thought that her heart would take her. And she felt that way too. I just didn't know when that would be. Well, then she got an infection and she took an antibiotic. And in 2 weeks, Sonia, she went from being a bundle of energy to so weak she could not walk from me to you.
Oh.
3 feet. when she would get in bed at night, she'd have to lay there for 20 minutes before she had the strength to roll over.
Mm.
And she never recovered from that.
Okay.
For 2.5 years, she struggled with that. And I was able, and I thank God for that. I was able to care for her in our home.
Yes, you were.
And
I'm glad you were able.
I learned a lot
Mm-hmm.
during those 2 years. I was never much of a cook. But our sunroom was just outside the kitchen window, and so while I was fixing the meal, I asked her for instructions, and so I learned how to take a frozen hamburger patty and thaw it and cook it, and cook a can of green beans and some corn. So one main meal we'd have hamburger, green beans, and corn. Next meal we'd have corn, green beans, and hamburger. Then we'd have green beans, hamburger, and corn. So we had some variety that way. But anyway,
That's fantastic.
She survived all that. But she was so weak, and we finally put in one of those chairs that will take you upstairs because our bedroom's upstairs.
Okay.
And she didn't. She said, "Honey, you want to put that chair in because you want me to be handicapped?" I said, "No, honey. We just want to make it easier for you." Well, finally she consented. And after she consented, she was sitting in the living room one day, and she said to me, "Honey, you know how we'd come out of the sunroom? To get out of the sunroom, you had to come up one step. And I'd want to come in the living room and sit for 20, 30 minutes before I go upstairs because I was trying to get up enough strength to climb those 13 stairs." But she was just determined she was not going to be handicapped. Well, 2 nights before she went home to heaven, she said, "Honey, I want to go to bed early." She normally went to bed about 6 o'clock. And after she would go to bed, I'd take care of things that I couldn't take care of when I was caring for her during the day. Then I'd come to bed, and she'd always wake up. We'd always snuggle, and then we'd go to sleep. It took us 2 hours to get her up that one step. And I finally got her up that step, got her to bed. The next night, we'd always sit in chairs there in the sunroom. We had a beautiful view out in the woods, deer, we had all kinds of animals that come up. And it was 4 o'clock, and she said, "Honey, it's in March." February. She said, "Honey, I want to go to bed." I said, "Okay." She got up, and I helped her around my chair to the steps. No, I got her up and got her to my chair, and she collapsed into my chair. She said, "I need to sit here a while." She said, "I'm ready now." And we got up, got her over to the steps. We tried for 2 hours to get her up the step. She said, "Honey, I can't make it." I said, "Honey, please don't sit down. I can't get you up if you sit down." I could get her up, but I would hurt her.
Mm-hmm.
So she finally collapsed on the step. And then she looked up at me and she said, "Honey, I'm going to sleep here tonight." We had nice thick carpeting in that room. And she lay down. And as she lay down, she looked up at me and she said, "Honey, will you hold me?"
Oh.
I said, "Yes." I went up and got blankets and pillows. Came down. By then it was dark. And we talked, lay down there, went to sleep. At midnight, we woke up, talked again, and went back to sleep. And sometime between midnight and 5 a.m., God called her home.
Oh.
I called. Her parents had died in our home. And I know you remember that because your husband preached, I think, both of their funerals. Didn't
he
you?
did.
I thought he did.
Yes.
They both died in our home. And I knew the procedure had to go through. I knew the police had to come. So I called them. And I called the undertaker and I called the kids. And of course the kids that were here, Jack and Debbie were here in Richmond, they came right over. And Jeff and Julian drove in from Chattanooga. And we had the service. And your son
Yes.
at that service.
Yes.
So kind of kept it in the family.
In the family.
He and Joy came over and had the service. It was just a family service, which was what we wanted, and it was a pleasure. It was very special. It really was, and she went. We put her body in the grave.
Mm.
We had already prepared all that because her parents had taken care of all their funeral stuff before. Excuse me.
You're fine.
Before. So when they died, everything was been taken care of. And so Judy said to me one day, we need to do that for our kids. Mm. And so we had everything all planned out. Wow. So there was nothing really to do except to just actually carry out what had to be done.
That's a blessing.
So yes, it was. And I'm so glad we did it because at that time, I don't think you think rationally.
True.
And so we had it all planned out. And her body is over at Washington Memorial, just a couple miles from our house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brother Knapp, so as we continue, I'm interested in hearing your point of view dealing with grief as a widower. For example, do you think men grieve differently than women, or what's been your experience so far? Maybe what's unique for a man versus a woman in grief?
I'm not sure that there really is a lot of difference. I do think there is some difference, but I think there's no way to prepare for what, because Judy and I had talked about our homegoing many times. Obviously, her parents died in our home, and I told you that her parents were raised in dysfunctional homes.
Right.
But her parents, I do not know of a couple who had a deeper love for each other than her parents.
They were special.
They really were.
I have the sweetest memento from, and I don't know, I guess, I'm not sure if it was from his funeral or hers, but y'all gave us the wood that he would whittle, like a chain out of one piece. Of wood. Yeah. And I still have that. And I'm trying to remember if we had two or the boys had one. There, but we've kept that. It's in my treasures.
He just, their relationship was, and when you know their background, it even is more marvelous. And I remember when her mother went home to heaven, we were standing around the bed. We knew that the time was close, and we were singing hymns, and we were singing Some Golden Daybreak. And that's when she looked up in the corner, and I think she was looking in the face of the Lord.
Wow. Wow.
It was really something. And I remember what he went through at that time, and he went through things that I did not go through, of course, because everybody's different. But you can't prepare for it, and God has to sustain you.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I don't know how anybody who does not know the Lord as their Savior, I'm not sure how they handle it.
Becca in her interview last week said the exact same thing. I don't know how. And that's a really good point. You don't, anything we go through in life, you don't know till you know. I've just, in my devotions this week, I was studying, how what we've been through helps us to be able to comfort another person.
Right.
And it's so true. Whatever it is that you've been through, when there's somebody that's been through it, that you don't know till the other side of it.
Right. The thing that, of course, there's the shock. I mean, even though, because I think, as looking back,
yes,
I think Judy knew that'd be the last time I told her.
Yeah.
I really do.
I think she probably did too, to be that weak. Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't. And I only saw that looking back. And
I had that same experience with Don the morning that he passed. I think everybody in the scene, the workers, my sons, everybody realized what was happening. And I still thought, Oh, we'll get him to the hospital
Yeah.
and he'll be okay.
Yeah. Of course, she went in the night when I was asleep, so I didn't. Anyway, but God gave the peace.
Yes.
And the peace comes from, first of all, knowing where she is.
Yes.
Secondly, from knowing He's taking better care of her than I could.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of that, it helps a lot. And I think that is probably the biggest help to me. And I think about what she was, her energy and everything, and now then the weakness, and now she has strength again.
Yes, yes.
And but everything in the house, she was the decorator.
Okay.
If I had been left to decorate a house, it'd been painted walls, And but she has mementos all through the house. Every room speaks of Judy, and so the emptiness of the house, you have to deal with that. You have to deal with, I think, sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. At first, I had a terrible time with sleeping. I will say that is better now, although it still is a struggle.
Yes.
And I have found out something. I just found out is that some of the sleep aids I was taking was causing me to have terrible nightmares.
Yes.
And I did not realize that until just recently.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that one of the myths that men have is that men don't cry.
Oh, that's good to
And
find
I
out.
think that there's nothing wrong
No.
with crying yourself to sleep.
Yes.
Well,
I was married to Don Sumter, who cried a lot, remember? So.
Yeah, right. It doesn't say Jesus shed a tear at Lazarus' grave. It does not even say that Jesus cried at Lazarus' grave. That word is very overwhelming. Jesus wept.
Yes, good point.
And I think to really understand that, we have to think about the fact that God only records 2 times when Jesus wept at Lazarus' grave and over the city of Jerusalem.
Ah. Yes.
One, the loss of a friend, and the other, the loss of the city.
Yes.
And both those times the Bible says that Jesus wept. I think another problem that men have is men do not make intimate friends. I think it's our nature.
Right.
It's our nature. And I don't think that it's just because we don't want to be hurt. I don't think that's what it is. But I think that man is made that way. I think God made man that way. He's not going to have intimate friends.
Okay.
And so then all of a sudden, you don't have an intimate friend to share your heartaches with, and so on, and so that makes it difficult. And then there's the everyday things that all of a sudden are yours.
True, that maybe Judy did.
I took Judy shopping, but I didn't shop.
Right.
I mean, I may have pushed the cart, but I didn't shop. Judy shopped.
Okay.
And I didn't cook. Not that I couldn't cook. I just didn't. Judy did. Judy learned to be a cook in high school because her mother would rather be out milking the cows and driving the tractor.
Okay.
And so when they bought the farm, Judy became the cook in the house. And she became a good cook because of that. But I didn't do those things. So I think those are all things that all of a sudden they're yours. Now, I tell people jokingly that I follow the Irma Bombeck house cleaning plan,
I'm loving that you're bringing her up from whatever age, because I used to read her stuff and just cackle out loud. That's hysterical.
She would say, if you want to know spaghetti is cooked, you throw it against the wall, and if it sticks, it's cooked, and if it doesn't, it falls behind the stove, and nobody knows.
Exactly.
And you see my spider web up here in the corner. That's my science project. And you see the dust on my end table. That's my preservative that keeps it.
Yeah, I love it.
So that's my idea of house cleaning anyway. And probably somebody asked me one time, who does your house cleaning? And I didn't answer it. So
I'm just going to leave that one alone.
I'll leave that alone. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you had a very long marriage, as we said. Tell me again, it's 62 years.
62 years, 6 months, and 9 days.
And 9 days.
Yeah.
Which is just, more than almost a lifetime.
Yes, it is.
And I know that it's never long enough, but tell us some of the things that you and Judy, perhaps, I know that you were a very close couple and a godly example, so I think you sharing with us maybe some things that you all did in your marriage or you would recommend to other couples now or early on the journey.
Well, I think there are a couple things that, to me, were crucial in our relationship.
Okay.
First thing, in raising children, if we had a difference of opinion, we worked that out in our bedroom.
Good advice.
Our children, if you would ask either of our children today, they would tell you that their friends could manipulate parents, but they could not manipulate their parents.
Okay.
They will tell you that, right, frankly.
That's great.
That's one of the things they'll talk about is the fact, if mom and dad had a disagreement, we didn't know it because we worked those out. I think that's in relationship to children. In relationship to each other, make things special. I'll tell you one of the silly things that Judy and I did.
Mm-hmm.
When we were dating in college, of course, at Bob Jones, you couldn't date when you wanted to. You had certain hours you could date.
Okay.
And one of the things you could do, you could date in the snack shack. Well, neither one of us had money. We were from families, I considered us normal families, but by today's standards, we were both raised in poverty, but we didn't know it. But anyway, we didn't have 2 nickels to. So once a month, on the 13th, we would go to the snack shack and we'd buy a hot fudge sundae with a maraschino cherry on top for 25 cents. I got the maraschino cherry because she didn't like them. Anyway,
I love them.
anyway, she said she didn't like them. I think maybe she knew I did like them. And then we'd share hot fudge sundae. We'd make it last as long as we could because as long as the hot fudge sundae was there, we could date.
Yes.
Well, we were married on the 13th.
Oh.
And I didn't realize it until I got Judy's calendar. We started going steady on the 13th.
Wow.
And I didn't know that until I got the calendar. So the 13th has been special to us. And every month since we've been married, we've played a game. Who can say happy anniversary first in the morning?
Oh.
Well, I'm an early riser. And sometimes, and after the kids were gone, this took place. If I woke up at 1 minute after midnight, I'd wake her up and say happy anniversary. She said, honey, that's not fair. You can't do that anymore. So we stopped that. But on the 13th, every month, we would share some ice cream.
Oh.
It might not be anything more than a Snickers bar, on a frozen Snickers bar. It might be a dish of ice cream, might be a Frosty. It was something that was going to be special on that day. And then on anniversaries, we'd always try to do something special, try and get away, but make some special time. Don't forget your marriage vow.
That's good.
Don't forget your marriage vow. Honor that woman. Love that woman. Care for that woman. I don't know if you remember Calvin Eves or not.
I do.
But I will never forget when he retired from Clover Hill Baptist Church. They had a huge retirement banquet for him. Judy and I went. And he said, before I made a vow to be pastor of this church, I made a vow before that.
Yes.
And that's to be the husband of his wife. And his wife, of course, was suffering from Parkinson's and Alzheimer's at that time.
Okay.
And he resigned the church so he'd give his time to care for his wife.
Oh.
I've never forgotten that.
Mm-hmm.
God honored him for that.
Yes, he did.
Remember that. Another thing that Judy and I established early in our marriage was do not go to bed with unresolved conflicts.
Okay.
And that means you may be up all night
Right.
to get that conflict resolved, but get that resolved.
That's good.
And we followed that faithfully through our years. And then I think another thing that I would really recommend to people are the 10 most important words in the English language.
And what are those?
I was wrong.
Oh,
Will you forgive me?
that's good.
And then the last 3 words are, yes, I will.
Oh, that's great. And you're right, because if you can say that, you can get past about anything.
Yep. And we were sitting in Costco one day, and we were having a big lunch. We were going to share a piece of pizza. Where else can you take your wife for a lunch and only pay less than $10 but anyway, for both of you?
Yes.
Anyway, and we're just enjoying each other. And all of a sudden we realized there was somebody standing at our table. So we looked up and a young couple was standing there and said, "We've been watching you. And what is the secret
Oh,
of your marriage?" So we had a chance to talk to them about the Lord
what a
and
blessing.
about how the Lord had blessed us.
That is how I would describe you as a couple. I feel like you only had to be around you all for seconds or minutes and you knew how deeply you loved each other and cared for each other and respected each other. And that's amazing that in that short a time, strangers watching you knew that.
Yeah, and that happened more than once, but that one time was so important to us that they weren't even married yet. They were just dating, but they came over. I think they were engaged.
That's neat, the impression you made. And like you said, even a testimony. You were able to speak of Christ through that. That's amazing. We've talked about some of the ways you're dealing with your grief. I would like to know, this side of 2 years, some of the things that might be helpful to others grieving. For example, I wrote down some things like how it's affected you spiritually. Also, I know you specifically have been traveling and going to churches and to people, and is that part of your therapy, for lack of a better word, or your the continual process of healing on this journey? And then also we'll talk about too, like the importance of going to see your children and traveling, and so, like you were telling me, traveling is a little bit different for you now, and just so we'll start with spiritually how it's.
Well, and again, I Judy talked to me years ago about we knew pastors who were struggling. Mm-hmm. Of course, we were all over the state.
Yes.
In our 30 years of our ministry with VIB, we drove behind the wheel of an automobile over 1 million miles in Virginia.
Wow. That's amazing.
I preached in churches from Cumberland Gap to Fairfax, from Chincoteague to Clifton Forge, from Winchester to Virginia Beach. Mm. I don't know how many different churches I've preached in over the years. But in that time, we met many, many pastors who were a great blessing to us. But we've met some pastors who were really, really struggling. She said, "Honey, we need to reach out to them in a special way." So even before we had retired, we had started a ministry we called Barnabas. Barnabas is called the Son of Consolation.
Yes.
And we just reached out to these pastors who were in very difficult situations. I cannot share with you some of the difficult situations we dealt with. They were unbelievable. They really were. Well, I continued that ministry even after Judy went home to heaven.
Okay.
And some of those pastors I've been dealing with for years, and will deal with them until God calls me home or God calls them home, because their situations just continue to be very, very difficult situations. And so that has been part of the ministry. My opportunities to preach have helped. But God has to give the peace, and I do a lot of reading. I generally am reading 3 or 4 books at a time. I'll have one here in the room, another place in the room, and whatever room I'm in, I'll pick it up and be reading it. Music.
Yes.
Music. We were never television people. We never were. In fact, for years, we didn't even have a television in our home, and then we had one. And I remember when we put the television in here, we had to get cable. It was the only way we could get television. And so when the cable man came to hook up our TV, he said, "Where do you want this cord to come in?" And I said, "In that closet." And it was a coat closet. And he looked at me and I said, "I'm serious." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yes, I want a long cord on it. So when I want to watch TV, I can wheel my TV out," because we only had a 13-inch TV. I can wheel the TV out and we can watch it.
Oh, that's
and
great.
He said, "Please don't tell your neighbors that's what you do." It was so funny. So, but music has always been, you talk to our kids. From the time we get up in the morning till we go to bed at night, we have music in our home.
Yes.
And usually it's our own music. We have recorded and used to make it into cassette tapes.
Yes.
And I bought a cassette tape player that would play again and again and again. And then Judy put it all on CDs. So I have over 200 CDs.
Wow.
With music, and that's on all time. So music is a great therapy to me.
It was to me also, and still is. I love.
A great blessing, yeah. And of course, there are songs that bring tears to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
"Serenaded by Angels."
Yes.
"Sweet Sweet Beulah
Beulah
Land."
Land, yes.
A Judy song. "Channels Only." Our wedding song. "Savior Like a Shepherd Lead Us."
I love that one.
And these are on those tapes, and then other songs that became favorites of ours through the years and those are all things that have been a real help. And getting to see the kids is helpful too. Of course, the kids were here; 2 of them were here.
Right.
For a while, and then they moved to Pennsylvania, northern Pennsylvania.
Yes.
So it's been more of a problem to get to them. And I realized that I could not make that drive in one day anymore, because I'm afraid of falling asleep behind the wheel. Mm-hmm. I can do that very easily.
Okay.
So I listen to usually books on tape when I'm driving, because Judy's not there talking to me.
Right.
And that voice helps to keep me alert. I did do one big drive after Judy went home to heaven. Just before COVID, we were up in the Northeast, and Judy said, "Something you know what you ought to do, honey?" And she was always thinking. Mm-hmm. I think her motto was, "There's a better way to do it."
Oh.
Because she would make a suggestion for me that she would like this made or that made, and I want to draw up blue pens and everything. And she said, "Oh, honey, all I want is," and there's a better way. And we were up in the Northeast, and she said, "Hey, you know what we ought to do?" I said, "Oh, what's that?" She said, "I think we ought to touch all 48 states in 1 year." I said, "That didn't go all. We haven't done anything like that." So between then and when COVID hit and we couldn't travel anymore, we'd done 33 states. Mm. Now, some of them we cheated on. We went to Texarkana.
Right.
And from Texarkana, you can get in Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. And, so.
But you technically touched it all. Yeah.
But we had 15 states left. And so after she went home to heaven, I did a memorial trip.
Oh,
That took me all the way to California and back,
Oh, wow.
and it was a good trip. So I have done some traveling, and that's been good. I've gone to see one of Judy's sisters, and I've gone to see my brother-in-law. My two older sisters. Well, all of my sisters are dead, and their husbands, except for the one.
Okay.
And though I have a baby sister in Florida who's still living, but others are. So I have been to see them, and those are helpful. But the Word of God, God's presence is it's impossible without it.
Right.
It really is.
I agree.
Yeah.
So a final question that I have is, what do you think is God's plan and purpose for you right now? So many widows and widowers have told me they feel like they've lost their purpose when their spouse passed away or whomever. And how have you dealt with that? Did you feel that, or do you feel that? And how have you dealt with it?
At first, that was a real difficulty for me, in the fact that I had spent 2.5 years caring for Judy, literally 24 hours a day.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, nobody needed me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been retired from VIB since 2011.
Okay.
So here, 11 years later, nobody wants me to preach in their churches. No, a lot of the preachers that I knew are no longer in the ministry.
Sure.
The younger guys, Jack who? I mean, I've been off the scene for all those years, and of course we had COVID.
Yes.
So there was that whole year. So in reality, we'd been out of circulation really for 3.5 years.
Okay.
When you really boil down, it'd be just like we disappeared off the face of the earth.
Not for us.
Yeah,
but I know what you mean exactly.
And so my reason for is not quite right, but my reason for living for the last 2.5 years is gone.
Right.
So what am I going to do? Oh, I'm sure there was some times of feeling sorry for myself, but when I would do that, God would bring to mind, I'm taking care of her. And that was a great help to me, that alone. And then, of course, I continued some things, like Judy and I had been studying through Spurgeon's Psalms. I don't know if you ever read that or not, but it's 6 volumes.
Okay.
Like 200 pages per volume.
Okay.
And we didn't study everything. We studied his commentary. He had things in there for preachers, which we did not read, but the commentaries we read in. And so I finished that, and then I picked up other books to continue our devotional time, even though I'm doing it alone. And so the Lord brought a preacher to the church. James brought a man in, and I think he really brought him in for me, although James didn't know it. But the man spoke about the fact that God, and I know this intellectually,
right?
See, that God has a purpose, and God didn't leave me here just to wither up and die. He had a purpose. Maybe it's to help my children. And I know that I've been a help to Jack, Reuben, and Debbie. I'm not sure how much of a help I am to Jeff and Judy Lynn, but they're so busy in what they are. But
yet you've gone and spent quality time with them. That's precious to them.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah. In fact, I try to get with Jack, Reuben, and Debbie every 4 to 6 weeks.
Great.
With them and have time to be with them. And out of that, God has allowed me, then has helped me. One of the things that I have been doing is I have been trying to reach out to people in the church and have a time of fellowship with them.
Yes,
and,
you have.
That I want to be a blessing to them, but they in turn are a blessing to me in my reaching out to them.
And I'll say to that point, what you've done is you've just invited individuals or couples or families, and you've met them out for Arby's or wherever.
Arby's.
And I know, like, when Dan and I it finally worked out to do that, we had such a wonderful, very special time. That is a memory that I will always treasure. And then you also had your computer with pictures of Judy, which I'm hoping to get some of those and just have them here and there throughout the video. But it was such a special time for me and such an encouragement. So, like, I feel like you're continuing the Barnabas ministry, basically, too.
Yes, but it's a little different. Yeah, a little different. Yeah, instead of to pastors, it's
right,
just to people,
individual
in the church,
people,
right? And Judy and I were always so busy, we didn't have time to reach out to the people in the church. So this is, or we were gone so much,
right?
And so this has been good. I've met people in the church. I asked somebody the other day who this couple was, and I didn't even know who they were. I should have known, and so it was embarrassing.
Oh,
yeah. So that's what we've done.
So reaching out to other people, and I think that's important. I think when we're in our grief, it's tempting to stay to what we call wallow in our grief, and I don't mean that wrong. When you're grieving, you need time. You need time to just grieve, and time alone, and time with God. But I think part of the process of how we heal. And again, that's a continual thing, I think, all the way till we go to heaven. But it just reaching out and helping others and letting them and telling our story and focusing on what Christ is doing to help us through it or bring us through it.
Right.
So I think that's been amazing. I have thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to just talk to you today and hear your heart. Good. And I feel like I'm sitting at the feet of someone who has a wonderful testimony and a lot of advice that I would readily accept and look forward to applying. So,
well, thank you for the opportunity to share with you, Sonia.
Yes, and always special to talk about Judy because
she is.
She's one of my heroes of the faith also.
She's one of my heroes. It's a secular song, but it says it right. You are the wind beneath my wings.
Yes.
And she really was.
Yes,
she agree. Really was. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving your time today and for what you've put into preparing to talk to us.
Thank you for that.
And we love you in the Lord. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It helps my Nana if you're watching on YouTube to like and subscribe. If you are listening on the podcast, please like and follow. We would love for you to do that now to help our channel grow and become a blessing to others.